I don't understand my notes. I don't understand what the Eucharist is. I've heard the name before, but I can't figure out what it is. I mean, I can't wrap my head around the concept of it.
Oh, hey, Derek. Did you just say you're having a hard time trying to figure out what the Eucharist is?
I don't understand what it means. I mean, I know the term, but I just can't wrap myself around the whole concept of what the Eucharist is or what it pertains to.
Yeah, for Christians, it can be a hard concept to grasp, especially with all these different types of belief.
I know there's so many. I mean, the Catholics believe something different. The Baptists believe something different. I just don't understand what it all means.
Well, if you don't mind, can I help you?
Sure, I love that.
Well, first of all, Eucharist is basically a ceremony. It's it's giving thanks because Jesus gave thanks.
Okay.
And it's a participation that we partake, that Jesus partook as well, for his death and resurrection. This ceremony is also commonly referred to as Lord's Supper.
I've heard of that
in the Bible.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
And where Jesus, had all his disciples sitting around, and he had his last meal, and he wanted the disciples to remember what Jesus was here for. He wanted the disciples to know that he came here to be crucified and to give himself away, to sacrifice himself, so that we all can be saved.
But it's so confusing because there's so many different views on there's so many different religions that practice different things on it.
All right, so let's go over what all 4 or 5 of these different beliefs are.
Okay.
Come along with this journey with me today to find out the many interesting facts of the Eucharist.
All right, let's go.
Whoa!
What's going on? What's happening?
Whoa! All right, come over here and join me.
All right.
So, like we said earlier, there are many theories on what we must do for the Eucharist.
Mm-hmm.
But not all denominations interpret it the same. In fact, there are many different manners in which denominations believe in how we must do it. Mm-hmm. And now let's just take a look and see how Catholicism, treats the Eucharist and what they believe.
Doesn't the Catholic Church believe that the bread is like the actual body of Christ or something in that terms?
Exactly. That belief and that action is actually called transubstantiation, which is what the Roman Catholic believe, and they actually believe that the substance that they take and drink are Jesus' literal body, not physical, but the substance is actually him, and the blood is also him.
Wow. Well, I've been to a Baptist church before, and the way they did it is they kind of didn't want you to take it if you had sin in your heart, or you were had something against your neighbor or your brother. And the way they did it was they had the bread and they had the grape juice, but it wasn't. I don't think that the Baptists believe that it's the actual body. Like
No.
the Catholics do.
In fact, they believe in a different meaning on what the Eucharist is actually. But if we continue to discuss about the Roman Catholics, they take it very serious, just like the Baptists. In order when you take the Eucharist, you're supposed to forgive whoever you have done wrong to, or if you have any problems with any individual, you're supposed to fix that problem, then take the Eucharist as a way of showing God that you're willing to give up anything and be forgiven and be right with God.
That makes sense. Now it's I'm going to start to understand a little bit better now.
Yes, so now let's talk about what actually the Baptists believe. So, like you said before, the Baptists do something similar, but they don't actually think what they're partaking and what they're eating is not the actual substance of Christ. Mm-hmm. And that definition is called memorialism, which is they believe that, in partaking with the sacrament, they are memorizing and remembering the sacrifice that Jesus did for all of us in this world. So, like you said, they can use grape juice or any type of cracker, but they don't think it's actually Jesus. They just do it as a remembrance.
So they kind of do it the same way as the Catholics do. They believe that if you have sin in your heart, you should ask for forgiveness first. But they believe that it's not the actual body. It's more you're doing it in remembrance of Christ and what He did for us on the cross.
Exactly, that's right.
Okay.
Now, consubstantiation
Mm-hmm.
is the belief that the substance of God and the substance of the bread and wine coexist in a union with each other. So it's not necessarily the actual body of Christ,
Mm-hmm.
but the presence comes in when you're taking.
Okay. So most churches don't practice that, though, do they?
There are some churches that believe, but not most.
Okay.
Yes. So transubstantiation and memorialism are both the most popular one out of the different kinds of belief. Now, the fourth one is called receptionism. Now, this one is very interesting. Now, they both don't coexist with the sacrament of the bread and wine, or they're not the actual part of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, Christ is present when you're taking this communion.
Mm-hmm.
It's like He is right next to you while you're doing it, or He's just present when you're participating in the sacrament.
Okay, that makes sense. See, in Matthew 26:26, it says, "Now they were eating. Jesus took the bread and blessed it and broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, 'Take it, eat it. This is my body.' And He took the cup and gave thanks and said, 'Drink, all of you, for this is the blood of the covenant.'" So this is where the Roman Catholics get it from.
Yeah,
Let's
that's
get it
called
from.
transubstantiation. They actually taking it literal, saying that Jesus meant that this is always going to be my body and this is always going to be my blood.
And that's number 4. You said there's a 5th one. There's 5. What is the 5th one?
Exactly. Now, come on this journey with me and we'll discover what this 5th one is. Whoa. All right, so meet William Booth. He is the founder of the Salvation Army, and he is actually quite extraordinary because he made a statement for the Salvation Army that we are actually non-sacramental.
So, in other words, we don't believe in celebrating the Last Supper.
Not necessarily, but we just treat it a little different than most denominations.
Okay.
Let me give you some examples. The reason why Booth made the statement and decided to make this for the whole Salvation Army was basically because he understood the Lord's Supper as an example of what it meant to follow Him.
Mm-hmm.
You see, he wanted his followers to remember Him, remember His sacrifice. That's why he said, let's do communion, take this bread, which is meat, and take this wine, which is my blood. It wasn't necessarily because they were both part of Him, but it was so that the disciples could remember and recognize that Jesus was going to die for the salvation of our lives.
So in other words, we believe that our lives should be sacramental in the way we live our lives.
Exactly.
Not just participating in a specific sacrament or meal or Last Supper, but our lives should be like a living sacrament. That's kind of what, it sounds like what you're saying and what Booth believed.
Exactly. So what Booth meant also was that in every meal, that should be a sacrament of remembering.
Okay.
We should remember His sacrifice in everything we do, just like you said. So for example...
That happened.
For example, William Booth believed that when I'm going to take a bite of this brownie, we should remember Jesus' sacrifice that we did. So whenever I'm eating something like this brownie, I'm remembering that Jesus sacrificed His life so that you and I can be saved.
So in other words, it doesn't have to be done just once a year. It should be done in every meal that we do. Every meal that we have, we should remember what Christ did for us and the sacrifice he did for us.
Exactly. There's actually a lot of controversy between all of these beliefs, and that's why Booth wanted to stay away from it, because it brought a lot of disagreement, and it wasn't worth all of that effort to explain and the struggle to argue amongst our fellow Christians.
All right, now I understand.
Now, what was also important about William Booth's statement was that he was saying that taking communion, taking the bread and wine, wasn't necessary for our salvation.
Mhm.
Just because we ate a piece of bread and drank a little bit of wine didn't mean that we were forgiven.
Mhm.
In fact, it meant a lot more than that. It means that our lives should constantly be a sacrament, that we should constantly be remembering what Jesus did for us, and that we should always continue to submit and live a Christian life.
That makes more sense than doing it that way and not just doing it once a year or a couple times a year like the other denominations. Thanks, Mike. Now I have a better understanding of what the Eucharist means, what the Last Supper means, and I kind of agree with the Salvation Army's position on it. I appreciate you helping me out on that.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. I love explaining all these things about theology.